James Ernest, Grill and Truth Radio Network, here with Bruce, the author of Cap in Hand, How Salary Caps Are Killing Pro Sports and Why Free Markets Could Save Them. So what inspired you to write the book?
Well, I was sitting watching, I think it was a Tigers and Orioles game, in which neither organization was really trying to win the game. I mean, the players were trying to win. They were doing their best. But the organizations had clearly told their fans that even though they were going to charge them full price for the tickets this year and for their cable subscription, that they weren't really trying this year. They were planning to lose, and they were planning to lose probably for this year and for next year, maybe even the year after that, so that they could cut their payroll and maybe come back in a couple of years and be a championship team like the Cubs or the Astros were. And I thought, how we got to this point? I thought parity and salary caps were supposed to have made it equal so that a Cincinnati could compete with a New York City or one of those kind of economies. How did we get here that we now have organizations that are basically saying we're not trying? And so I gave it some thought, and I looked and I thought, well, where's the best example of an alternative? And that, to me, is, of course, is the way they do soccer in Europe, which is you play at the level you can afford. You kill what you eat, and nobody complains about the fact that smaller markets can't compete with bigger markets. Everyone understands that that's just the reality of it, and that's how sport works. And so I said, why wouldn't we go back to doing that in North America, so that for smaller markets, the people in the smaller markets won't be put over a barrel by the local people to build a stadium. You won't have to pay $350 to go and see an NFL ticket. Things will be more affordable, etc. So I think that's the free market example that I'm talking about.
So to the extent of, say, if there was a major league team and they weren't doing well enough, they would move down to AAA or AA?
Well, what you would do, what you have in Europe is that everybody is part of the major leagues. It's just that you play at different divisions. So it would be the equivalent of the second division in soccer, and you would have relegation and promotion the way they do in soccer in North America. If a team mismanages its business so badly over a series of years, they would be a team that instead of getting a first-round draft pick would end up in the second division. And likewise, if a team in the second division ran their business well, developed a lot of good young players, they could move up to first division. So there certainly is an opportunity for teams in smaller markets and medium markets to still win, but it's just a different path that acknowledges that salary caps aren't the way to get there.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a lot more fluid type of sport, where right now it's kind of more rigid and, you either are what you are, and, like you said, there's a bunch of have-nots and haves.
Yeah, it's the basic forces of economics that push you in different ways. I think, listen, my suggestion in the book is that, for instance, with Major League Baseball or the NHL or the NBA, that the top division be about 20 teams, and then you have a second division of about 20 teams. I'm not talking about a market like a Cincinnati losing the Reds, or I live in a small market NHL city. I'm not talking about those teams losing the franchise and disappearing the way, let's say, the Montreal Expos disappeared. I'm talking about them being able to maintain their teams and be able to still cheer on their teams and have the history and all that stuff, but also to be able to do it at a level that, in terms of ticket prices and in terms of affordability, makes it much easier on people to go and see them in those markets.
Of the four major sports, which one do you feel has had the greatest impact or greatly impacted by the salary cap, and which one do you think it has affected the least?
Well, the NFL was the one that really invented salary caps and invented revenue sharing and all those types of things back in the 60s. They were the ones that started this whole notion of having Green Bay be able to compete with New York City, and every other league has tried to imitate them. So they've been the best ones in terms of being able to manage it. Now, one of the reasons that they were able to do that is the majority of their money came in from national sources as opposed to local sources. So the head office could dictate to the teams a lot more. In terms of which of the systems works best, I guess baseball does, because they don't have a salary cap. They have a thing that's called a luxury tax, and if you're up at the top end and you go over a certain spending limit on your payroll, you start to pay a heavy tax on how much you go over that limit. So it works okay for its purposes, but we still don't need 30 teams in Major League Baseball or 32 teams in the NFL or 31 teams in the NHL. We need fewer teams, and we need it for it to make sense. And the thing that the soccer people have understood is the sports industry has changed. Back when I started, and I've been in this business 35, 40 years, back when I started, it was all about having the franchise model, as if it was KFC. You put one on every corner. And that model is extinct now. The model that works now for the younger generation is they're interested in the stars. They're interested in the best teams playing the best teams. They're not interested in Sacramento playing New Orleans on a Tuesday in February. They want to see the best teams. And I think that this is also an acknowledgement that the industry has changed, and the younger generation doesn't root for the crest on the chest the way people used to. And the sooner the people in North America get this message that the young consumer is not interested in what they're selling, the better for them, because if they don't get with it, it's going to hit them hard.
Do you feel that by changing the model and having the two different leagues, then that would give better quality play as well, because you'd have more of the higher end players on the same teams?
Yeah, you concentrate the best players on the best teams. Again, that's what happens in soccer. That's what we do in the NCAA. Take a look at the NCAA. Nobody's bothered that every year Ohio State and Alabama are top football programs, and Kansas and North Carolina and Duke are top basketball programs in college. Nobody has any trouble with the best teams being at the top of the heap in basketball. The broadcasters still love it. The advertisers are there. The fans are still there. So it shows you that this idea that we need parity to keep everybody having a chance to win is really a bit of a crock. That for the purposes of competition, people want to see excellence.
How were you able to do such intense research into this topic? Where were you able to get the access to all the information?
Well, I've been in the business for 35 or 40 years, and sort of the business of sport has always been my specialty. In fact, I wrote an entire book about the labor history of the NHL and its union and its players. So I've always been interested in this subject. I've written and talked about it through a bunch of labor disputes in baseball and hockey and the NBA. So obviously this particular topic is something that I've studied for a long time. The book started with 12 contracts that I thought, from starting with Babe Ruth to the present day, that could sort of illustrate what I was talking about, how we'd gotten to this point and why salary caps didn't work. And that's the center of the book. But the argument about what we should do next is the last part of it. So I also had help from Kevin Gauthier, Ryan Gauthier, who is my co-author on this. He's a sports lawyer, and he helped contribute a bunch of stuff to the book, so that I would know where I was, in legal terms, that I was on safe ground. Sometimes I play a lawyer on radio and TV, but I'm not really a lawyer, so I got him to help me out a little bit.
So, like you were saying with the caps, unfortunately they haven't benefited the teams as well as they'd like. Who do you feel are some of the teams that it has hurt the most?
Well, I think any big market that doesn't get to eat what it kills has been punished by this. If you're a big market like a New York, a Chicago, Toronto, Los Angeles, any of those people who bring in huge amounts of money and they can't use it to improve their team have been hurt, at least in a competitive sense. They've made tons and tons of money. I'm not saying hold a parade for them or a cap day for them, but they made huge money, but they haven't been able to spend it to make their teams better. So to a certain extent, that they've been punished by it.
Do you feel that gambling in sports, because that's one of the hot button topics, it could end up changing the salary structure?
I think it's a contributing factor to why people see pro sports differently today. The ability, and now that we've had the new the law go through that allows for gambling in all of the other states other than just Nevada, I think it's changed. It's a contributing factor to why people watch pro sports these days. A lot of people do like to bet on it. Now legally they can bet on it much easier. And the funny thing is when you're betting, you have your favorites for that day, but they're not necessarily the teams you'll like the next day. I think again, tastes have changed about what people want, and they want to watch the best games. And I think gambling will have an effect on that. There's absolutely no doubt that a large part of the NFL's impact and its success has been because of gambling, because of the wagering that's done on it, the pools, the fantasy stuff that's been done on it. That's an enormous amount of the NFL's popularity. If you strip the gambling and that out of the NFL, I think you'd see a much diminished league in terms of people watching it. So I think gambling is going to be, going to continue to be, and maybe be even more so, a huge contributing factor to why people watch pro sports. But again, it won't be necessarily to watch the home team. It'll be to watch somebody who they're betting on.
With football and basketball and hockey, they seem more open to change. Do you feel the fact that baseball is more reluctant in change is going to hurt them when it comes to this area?
I wouldn't say baseball is more reluctant to change. I think baseball was more liberal in not adopting the salary cap. I think they're all kind of pig-headed about it. And here's what's going to happen in the next couple or 3 years. You're going to see that the NBA and the NHL and Major League Baseball the leagues are going to start talking again about locking out their players. Right now, they're on long-term deals with their players. You're going to start hearing about them locking them out again, the possibility of losing a season, so that the owners who talk like capitalists but act like socialists can have their salary cap tweaked again to their benefit, and to make it even more restrictive, so that they have absolutely no possibility of losing any money. And I think the public, which has given up full seasons to get a salary cap, they've sacrificed. 1994, we lost the World Series. The NHL has lost full seasons. The NBA has lost half or a quarter of the season on occasions. People have sacrificed those years saying, okay, we'll let you get your salary cap so long as we're able to see our teams in the future. But if these owners think they're going to come back in 2 or 3 years from now and expect to start the whole process over again, I think they're in for a very rude surprise.
What do you feel is the biggest change that needs to happen along with this?
Well, I think that we need a quote-unquote a crisis to precipitate why people would look at a different way of doing something. That could be a competing league. They're starting up a competitive league for the NFL now. I don't think it's ever going to threaten the NFL yet. But if another league were to come along and do something in a different way that the fans liked it even more, that would be one way to spark some change. Obviously, the numbers on TV going down the way they are for the NFL has also got to be a crisis point for them, something that's got to worry them. And as I say, the threat of using labor lockouts once again to try to refine this system and punishing the fans for their loyalty, I think these are all sort of points of crisis which could precipitate a change.
If fans are interested in getting this book, where are the best spots to find it at?
Well, as always, you can go on Amazon or you can go on any of the booksellers, the online booksellers. They'll all be carrying it. If you have a choice, go to the local bookstore. If you have a private local bookstore in your town, go there and get them to order it and give them the business. I prefer a small local business get the business, but if you can't get it any other way, as I say, online, there's lots of places like Amazon and Borders and some of the chains where you can go online and order it. I think people will find it an interesting and refreshing change from the usual stuff that you hear from the sports media.
Who are some of the people you like to thank for their help and support with the book?
Oh, wow, this goes back a long way. I've had a lot of help from various player agents over the years in writing some of the books, and they've helped me formulate my ideas on it. As I said before, Ryan Gauthier, the lawyer, helped me with it a little bit. Also, a guy named Mike Gillis, who used to be a major agent in hockey, and then he went on to be the president and general manager of the Vancouver Canucks. Mike has always been really generous, helping me understand a lot of these issues. But by and large, what I'm doing and what I'm talking about is off the beaten path, and it doesn't necessarily get any support from people in the establishment of sport. They're very concerned about the status quo and keeping it going. They're afraid of the realities that face them, and they just would rather ignore them. So it's a little bit of an independent project in that way.
And then, if fans are wanting to find out more about you, read more of your stuff on the web, on social media, where should they check you out at?
On Twitter, my account is @Doughboy, and that's spelled D as in David, O-W, B as in Bob, B as in Bob, O-Y. So two B's in there, @Doughboy. And my website is notthepublicbroadcaster.com. Notthepublicbroadcaster.com. That's in Canada. CBC is the public broadcaster. I'm not the public broadcaster.
I was going to say, it's funny that it's the Doughboy thing, because you were my second Doughboy this week, actually. I had an MMA fighter, Jared Trice, earlier this week, and that's his nickname as well.
Well, somebody's got Doughboy with only one B. That's why I wasn't able to use that one. Maybe he's the guy who's got it for Twitter.
It's a possibility. But Bruce, I'd like to thank you for being on the show. It was very informative, and we definitely wish you the best with it.
Thanks very much. I appreciate your interest in the book.
My pleasure.